Tagalong Bride by Ruth Ann Nordin, Chapter 18. Bowers snickered as he tapped the bottom of the lawman's boots. "You aren't so confident now that we tied you up, are you?" After a pause, he added, "I guess we can't fault you for trying. You meant well in trying to rescue the lady." Bernadette watched as the dark-haired lawman shifted and made another attempt to loosen his ropes. They had tied his hands behind his back, which made the task even harder for him. The fight was pointless. Bauer and his men had done a good job. Her only hope of rescue had probably been ruined. Tears welled up in her eyes. Somehow, Lucas had managed to acquire the funds to send someone for her, and it had all been for nothing. This was so unfair. Lucas had done everything he could to secure her a comfortable future. Lucas said that the rancher in Hardyville boasted of a few hundred heads of cattle and had prospered from some of the gold and silver mining he'd done. "Your lifestyle won't change a lot since he has money," Lucas concluded. That had come as a huge relief to her. She didn't know what she'd do if she had to give up the luxuries that she was used to. When Lucas first brought up her going to Arizona, she'd gotten this horrible image of her mind of ending up in a shack. "All right, Cooper, it's time we talked." Bauer turned to the dirty man who, as unbelievable as it was, seemed like he hadn't bathed in a much longer time than her other captors. To her dying day, she didn't think she would get the stench of him out of her nostrils. "Did you send out the ransom note to Lucas Reed?" Bauer continued. "I did." Cooper beamed as if he had done the world a good deed. "Did he send the money to your bank?" Bauer pressed when Cooper didn't say more. "I came here as soon as I sent the ransom note." "I told you to make sure her brother paid the ransom note before you came out here," Bauer said. "I don't recall you saying that. I was told to come out here and watch for anyone who would come to her rescue." Cooper gestured to the lawman, who was, even now, still trying to wiggle out of his ropes. "I found Deputy Zeke Ritter coming in this direction." Bauer let out a frustrated sigh. "We saw how lousy he is with a gun. We can handle him. I told you to make sure the money comes in and then come out here." Cooper frowned. "I really don't remember that." "Do I look like I make things up?" Cooper jerked at the sharp tone in Bauer's voice. Bauer looked at Big Mike and Squiggy. "You two were there. What did I tell him?" "You said to make sure the money came into the account," Big Mike spoke up. "After that, he was supposed to be on the lookout for any lawman who would try to stop us from getting to town to get the money." Bauer gave Cooper a pointed look. "Those were my exact instructions." "It's a good thing I was looking out for trouble. Her brother sent Zeke to get you, and if I hadn't spotted them, you wouldn't have known about it." "Them," Big Mike inserted. "There were two others with him," Cooper said. Bernadette's heart leapt with hope. There were others coming to rescue her? "Who is with him?" Bauer demanded. "No one who could be a threat," Cooper replied. "The man didn't have a gun, and a woman can't do any harm." Bauer glared at him. That man might have been the brother. He went to Zeke, and Zeke stopped struggling to get out of his ropes. "Were you with this girl's brother?" He pointed to Bernadette. Zeke raised his head in defiance. "I'm not saying." "It has to be the brother," Big Mike said. "He came out here instead of sending the ransom, and Zeke was so stupid that he didn't bring any other lawmen with him." Zeke gasped. "I'll have you know that I take my role as deputy seriously. I know what I'm doing." "Which is why we caught you the moment you entered this hideout," Bauer commented with a snicker. Zeke's face grew bright red. "I meant to let you catch me. This is all a ploy to make you think you won." Somehow Bernadette doubted that, and she wasn't the only one who was skeptical, because the other men gave Zeke an amused look. Zeke was trying pretty hard to portray himself as a grand hero, but no one was buying it. Her shoulders slumped. If Lucas didn't send the money, it was because their family really was in trouble. She had suspected it before. Now there was no doubt left. Lucas had given her all the money they probably had left before she went to the train station. Growing up, he'd always been protective of her. This was his way of making sure that she would be all right. Despite the situation she was trapped in, her thoughts went to their mother. What did Lucas do for her? "All right, Cooper," Bowers said as he turned his attention to the fourth bandit. "Get out there to be our lookout, just in case Zeke was smart enough to get other lawmen out here to help him." Cooper blinked in surprise. "I just got here. Can't someone else be the lookout?" "You didn't listen to instructions. You get stuck with lookout." Bauer pushed Cooper towards the opening of the hideout. "Go on." Cooper let out a disgruntled moan, but headed out. Squiggy shook his head. "I can't believe you think he's smarter than I am. I could have handled that telegraph in Belmont better than he did." "You don't have a bank account," Big Mike reminded him. "You've been on the wrong side of the law too long." Squiggy closed his mouth, thereby preventing any other protest he might utter. "It's getting late," Bauer told the group. "We might as well get something to eat and then settle in. I'll take first watch this evening." As the three bandits gathered around the small fire, Bernadette glanced at the remaining sunlight. Within half an hour, the sky would be dark. If Lucas really was out here, could he even help her? And what was all this talk about a woman who had joined him and Zeke? Was the woman trained to aid in rescues? "Don't you worry about a thing," Zeke whispered to her. "I'll get you out of here." Her gaze went to the ropes that bound his wrists and feet together. He was still struggling to get out of them, but to no avail. If he kept it up, he would wear himself out. It was on the tip of her tongue to ask him if more people were helping Lucas rescue her, but she decided against it. He had just said that he would get her out of here. That implied there was no one else. So she supposed that even the woman would not be useful. With a heavy sigh, she settled against the wall behind her. She couldn't fault Lucas for sending Zeke to get her. How was he to know how poorly Zeke would manage this rescue? She still couldn't imagine who the woman was, but if Lucas brought her along, there had to be a good reason for it. Certainly, the woman couldn't be their mother. Their mother was too old to wander around in this wild territory. Maybe she'd never find out who this woman was. Maybe she'd never see Lucas again. Maybe these men would sell her off to the highest bidder now that they weren't going to get the ransom money. A tear fell down her cheek. For the first time since she was kidnapped, she truly felt like her situation was hopeless. "I think this will be a safe place," Lucas said as he peered into a cavern that was along the canyon wall. Even with the moonlight pouring down on them, it was hard to see anything that wasn't close by. He shivered and went into the place that would be his and Gail's hideout for the night. They had passed a few other holes in the side of the canyon walls, but this was the only one large enough to allow a small campfire. He had told Gail they needed something to heat their food, but the truth was, he didn't want to sleep in the dark. "I think this is far back enough so no one will notice us," Gail said. She rubbed her hands together. "I didn't expect it to get so cold in here. Let's get a fire started." She placed her things on the ground. He hurried to put his things down and then dumped the branches that he'd gathered after securing their horses in an area that seemed to have good ventilation. They worked in silence to get the fire going. Once they had sufficient light, he examined the walls of their temporary dwelling. He noted the trickle of water coming down the side of one of the walls. "We have a water source." When she looked at him, he pointed to it. "It's not much, but we can fill our canteens before leaving here tomorrow." She inspected the crack that allowed the water to find its way down the wall and nodded. "That'll work." "I'm relieved. I worried we would have to go all the way down to the river." He was relieved too. It was nice that water was one thing they weren't going to have to worry about. He went to the opening of the hideout and scanned the area. He didn't see any signs of another hideout. Everything was so dark. They'd heard a couple of gunshots earlier, but the echo made it impossible to tell which direction those shots had come from. All he knew was that they were close. Bernadette was somewhere nearby. Tomorrow, they would finally find her. With another glance outside in the vast darkness, he retreated back into the cavern and set his hat next to hers on the ground. "Do you want pemmican or jerky?" Gail asked as she went to the bag that contained their food supplies. Lucas grimaced. "I think I'll skip dinner tonight." He retrieved one of their bedrolls and loosened the string holding it tightly together. He shook it out and laid it on the hard surface. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I missed the eggs." "I thought you disliked eggs," Gail said, not hiding her surprise. "I don't mind eggs. They're all right. They're a lot better than pemmican and jerky." "What do you usually have for breakfast?" "Pancakes and waffles. I've eaten eggs, but not often." He retrieved the other bedroll. "Do you eat eggs?" "For almost every breakfast." "Do you think that'll be a problem?" He set his bedroll next to hers. "Why would it be a problem? You're not planning to cook breakfast when we get back to Pennsylvania, are you?" "No, of course not," she said. "I just didn't expect us to have a difference of opinion on what we eat for breakfast." He studied her and noted the worried wrinkle across her forehead. He chuckled. "It's just breakfast. What does it matter if we want eggs or not?" "I guess it doesn't. It's just a meal." "Right. So why does it bother you?" "Well, it just occurred to me that we don't share all the same interests." Her gaze met his. "Is that bad for a marriage?" He squatted next to her and set a comforting arm around her shoulders. "That's not what makes a marriage bad. What makes a marriage bad is when the people in the marriage don't want to be together." He gave her shoulders a squeeze. "I want to be with you, and you want to be with me. We're going to be fine." She relaxed. "I suppose it's like friendships. You don't have to agree on everything to be friends with someone." "Exactly. There are plenty of things we agree on. It doesn't matter if we both love eggs or not." He kissed her cheek. She turned to face him, and he pressed his lips to hers. At once, he deepened the kiss. Perhaps if he hadn't been so excited earlier that day with all the kissing they'd done, he would have had the patience to take things a little slower. But as it was, he had very little in the way of patience. He wanted her. He wanted her more than he had ever wanted anything. He didn't remember why he hadn't desired her on their wedding day. Maybe it was because he'd been so worried about his family's financial situation that he hadn't taken the time to really get to know her. Well, he had gotten to know her during this time in Arizona, and he couldn't think of a better lady to share his life with. As Zeke had said, she was like a sunset, easy to miss, but breathtaking when one took the time to examine her. Lucas drew her up against him. Now that they weren't going to risk getting caught by someone, he could give himself completely to her. And she, likewise, could give herself completely to him. He was nearly giddy at the realization. The canyon might not be the most practical place to consummate a marriage, but given how beautiful it was fitting. I'm going off script here to let you know that stuff happens here that I am not allowed to say in this video because the platform will not allow it. But let's just say stuff happens, but they do not go all the way. And the reason they do not go all the way is because this happens. Just when Lucas was trying to unfasten a button at the waist of her skirt, he felt something brush his fingers. At first he thought she was helping him, but then he remembered her hands were clenching his shoulders. Eyebrows furrowed, he lifted his head and saw a small brown creature crawling on his hand. Its pincers went up as if it was ready to strike him. Without thinking, he screamed and flung the creature off of his hand. It flew to the other wall across from them. He pulled Gail off of the bedroll and stumbled as he took them both to the safety of the other side of the cavern. He searched for the scorpion and saw it running behind a large rock. He screamed again and hugged her. "What is it?" she asked. "Does someone need help?" came another voice. Lucas pushed Gail behind him so that the man would not see her in her half-dressed state. The dark-haired man, who appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s, charged into the hideout. His muscles rippled under his shirt. He stood several inches taller than Lucas, and he gave Lucas a hard look, as if to determine whether Lucas was a threat or not. When he tried to peer around Lucas, Lucas blocked him from getting to see Gail. He would take a bullet before another man looked at Gail in her state of undress. All of Gail was for him and him alone. The man lowered the gun, paused, then asked, "Who are you?" The chapter ends there. I answer this question in the next chapter. It's a bit of a cliffhanger here, but the scene just kept going on and on, so I had to make another chapter for it. See you guys next time.